new. That or it's the Zoom update I did. Lauren, do we have any members of the public that would like to speak?
There are none.
Okay. In that basis, I've opened up the wrong thing. I opened up the minutes instead of the agenda, but I think our first item is usually the minutes. Yep. Do we have any comments or questions on the minutes? Hearing none. In that case, can I get a motion to advance the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Okay. All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
All opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Excellent. Excellent. All right, and we are good. So our one abstention is Joan, who is otherwise engaged for that period of time. And let's go on then to our next item. So do we have any members of the public that would like to speak to us, Lauren?
Nope.
Okay. In that case, I like your minute note. Continue review and revision of charter document. It's I feel like we're on the march.
Let me get my screen share going.
Are you actually back in town hall, Lauren?
I am.
Look at that.
And we're open to the public 5 days a week, and it's lots of fun.
That didn't sound very sincere, Lauren.
No, I don't think it did. So let me get us back to where we left off last time.
Thank you again, Liz, for taking over so I could be in two places at once.
No problem.
Lauren, while you're doing that, that brings up a question. Are we getting to the point in time where we need guidance as to how we will meet?
So the state has only extended the remote only option for meetings through June 30th. I am not sure if they are going to extend that again. I have a meeting tomorrow, an internal meeting tomorrow to go over the future of hybrid meetings. What we're being told at the state level is that hybrid meetings are going to become mandatory. So meetings from here on out are going to be mandated to have some hybrid option where it allows the public to at least view the meeting in real time remotely. So that's kind of a hurdle that we're going to have to get through to provide that for all meetings. Right now we have room A set up to do that, and we only had that affecting elected committees and boards and maybe some of the other more regulatory committees. So we're trying to determine at town campus exactly how that hybrid option will work for all other committees going forward, and kind of doing it on a time crunch.
Well, let us know, because it impacts our attendance. So my recollection under hybrid rules in the past was all that really means is we have to provide a way for the public to attend the meeting in the conference room. We commissioners don't necessarily need to be there as long as somebody is there. Exactly.
That is current FOIA rules for public access, is that you all could be on Zoom or you all could be on speakerphone, as long as there's one person in public in the room that allows the public to also hear the conversation. That meets that requirement, but we're being told that there are going to be more specific parameters of what that means after 7-1.
Excellent. And the only other comment I would plant in your head, which I'm sure you've already thought of, that from the standpoint of a commission as opposed to the public, room A is wicked tiny, right? That's the little conference room next to your office, isn't it?
No, room A is the fishbowl.
Oh, the fishbowl's fine.
Yep.
Okay. Excellent. So we will look for your further updates.
Yeah. What we're running into now is that we have a lot of committees that meet at the same time, so not everyone can be in room A. So that's going to be.
I will tell you that there's the person who runs events at our law school early on made the decision to schedule online meetings on the same space planning calendar as if they were physical, because this was her worry. And I sort of in retrospect now I see the wisdom of it. All right, where would you like to start? So how did the discussion end? Did we take on section 4, or is this about where we dropped off?
I think we got the end. I think we got through the whole thing, right? I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
No.
I was going to be like, that's fantastic. Liz, do that again.
I just, magic wand. No, I think we dropped off at, we decided since it was the new beginning of another section, we would stop there.
Right. So let's start with 401 and the basics. We haven't really had this in conversation, but I assume where there's no appetite to adjust 4 selectmen and 1 first selectman as the composition.
Before that, there's the title. Why don't we get rid of executive branch and just make Article 4 Board of Selectmen and First Selectman, or whatever we decide to call them? I realize that Selectmen isn't going to last.
Yeah, I'm for me personally, I'm all on board with seeing if there's a better. I find it slightly, the anachronism of selectmen feels just silly.
No,
but I would argue to leave the executive branch, because as a functioning matter, that for me, and maybe Joan, you can pop in, that was extremely useful to me. And I'll tell you why. A question comes up quite frequently as to, and this was brought up to Lauren and to me by one of our existing selectmen just the other day, about who can sign what. So who has executive authority to enter into contracts? And that seems like it's pretty easy. The answer is the Board of Selectmen. But people, what's a contract and what's an obligation gets a little leery. So I think in terms of just making it clear who has executive authority, which has a meaning, I like leaving it, though I'd be willing to entertain any other argument. Joan, I don't know if you had the same experience I did.
Yes, I think for the purposes of government, we need to have an executive branch, and it is the Board of Selectmen and First Selectmen. They're the ones who have the authority to legally, the main thing is contracts, contract negotiations, approval of those things, all of those pieces of the puzzle. So I would hesitate to remove that. I think I personally think it should stay in, and we could always ask Ira, but I thought we did, and I thought he said we should keep it in. I'm trying to remember now.
Well, if I remember him talking about the title of Article 4, I think we were talking about it in another context, but I don't remember.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I can tell you.
Go ahead, Bob. I don't want to just steamroll over your point.
This is not a throw myself on a spear type of thing. Is that
please? Nor should anything be here in the Charter Review Commission.
They also, well, certainly not. This is not one of them, but they also legislate. So
actually, they don't legislate. The town meeting legislates, and it defaults to them if it's not passed. So it is town meeting still legislates.
All these ordinances drawn up at the town meeting. And
the town, they act as if they're a subcommittee of the town meeting for creation of ordinances, for creation of legislation, but it's the town meeting that is the legislative body that votes on it.
So the Board of Selectmen never votes on anything?
No, they do. And then if we don't have a quorum, then their vote approves.
So they will vote to advance it. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Bob.
No, okay. So what I'm hearing is that the legislative function is shared.
Well,
by the Board of Selectmen and the town meeting.
In one sense,
current form.
Yeah. If we all wanted to advance a proposal to a town meeting, the town meeting can do it with enough signatures, right? Those were the sections we were just doing. And you can bypass the Board of Selectmen, but the Board of Selectmen cannot bypass the town meeting.
Okay. Yep.
So, and
cool.
it was, and just to sort of give you the point. Like certain boards, we have pension review, for instance. There's a question, they have a statutory piece, and then they work with the financial advisors and they oversee. And then the question is who, and I had this when I was liaison or something on the pension committee, who retains the advisor? You think it's the committee, but if I recall correctly, and I hope I'm not misremembering it, I think we have ultimately concluded that it had to be the Board of Selectmen actually retained them because they were the executive body. Other boards have attorneys; they have counsel advising them. Then the question is who retains them, and we end up with the Board of Selectmen. Though, if I recall correctly, there's an exception for Board of Ed. But so I think it's useful for just volunteers coming into these different boards, if they're going to use the charter, to see the word executive branch, because we actually talk about executive authority as a functional thing.
Yeah. No, the real problem is with the legislative language, but okay, sure.
Okay. So any other thoughts on composition 4.1? Okay. That then brings us to 4.1. Oh, let me make sure I'm not skipping over the red point. Sorry.
Yeah, I think we need to note, I think we should go with a 4-year.
So I want to advance a thought, and maybe I'm alone on the island on this one, but what would be the harm in leaving the regular selectmen for 2 years and advancing the first selectman to 4 years or 3 years?
Okay, so I'll debate you on this one. Because you're electing a first selectman, usually it's a full party that goes with it. If you have midterms that the other board members do, I think it's for them to go only 2 years is putting an arduous effort on the volunteers if they don't have a head of a ticket to run under. I'm putting my DTC hat on here, okay? And the fact of the matter is, my feeling is it would be confusing to the public to see, well, don't we have what are we voting for? Isn't anybody running for first if the other people are running? I think 3 years is undoable because of the timing. You have to go with municipal elections, and I believe they have to be in off years. If they don't have to be in off years, I'd like to throw the municipals with the whatchamacallit, with the state slates, so that we actually get a break, because right now, every year there is an election. So every year we're paying for elections, every year we're trying to generate enthusiasm for elections, and it can be very arduous. So I would go for just the straight 4 years. That would be my push, having gone through and, both been the person knocking on the doors and then trying to get people to knock on the doors. It's very difficult. And I think if you stagger, it becomes difficult with 5 people on the staggered side. You could stagger one of each party, one in 2 years, same kind of thing that we do with the Board of Finance, but with the Board of Finance, it's well, we've got to make that change anyway. But I think it's a 3 and a 3, Joe, if I'm not mistaken. 3 people.
4 and 2.
So 4 and 2. So you'd have to do 3 and 2. And then who are the 3? Who are the, you know what I'm saying? The other thing is, if you run as a team and then 2 years later, one of those people get knocked off, then all of a sudden you are a first select person that has a minority instead of the majority.
That's exciting.
No, it's not.
So
You want to see a quagmire? That's a quagmire. So I think if you're going to put the first select person for 4 years, you've got to give them the capability to not only manage the town for 4 years, but also deal with the same Board of Selectmen for 4 years. That would be my,
Let me ask, what is the argument for staggered terms?
So for the one thing I'd like to advance on the idea of 3 and 2, though, if I did two quick thoughts, Joan, on what you said. One, the idea about trying to think about exhaustion of the electorate so that they're recognized the voter as a way to potentially expand turnout, I think is actually first time I've heard that, and I think that's a really good idea. And Lauren, I don't know if we have to be on municipal cycle, if what our guardrails are for this. I'm not really sure, but my thinking was run as if the first selectman was 3 years hypothetically, and the regular selectmen were 2 years, then every other first selectman run, they'd be either on their own, so you're focused on the job of first selectman, or you're running as a slate, and that way 3 years, it's kind of like 2 is too short, maybe 4 is too long. three is not bad to ask someone to do the job. And I don't know that I necessarily, I sort of like the public conversation on one race head to head at that point in time. Maybe it would be clarifying. I mean, there's a lot of maybes and thinking about it, but it is a way that we could actually expand the term and not go to the full 4 years if we wanted to.
but then you're off cycle on everything else.
We'd
Right
be,
now,
we'd be
no.
on cycle for the selectmen like normal. We would be on cycle, off cycle, on cycle, off cycle for the first selectman.
Right, but the off cycle could be a presidential election. The off cycle could be a gubernatorial election. If you're doing 3 years, you're getting onto that cycle. And I think that that's a very difficult thing. If I'm running solo and I've got a bad presidential candidate and I don't have anyone else running with me because there isn't anything, I mean, every other municipal is in an odd year, that sucks, quite frankly, because from a management from the Democratic Town Committee, everybody wants the upper tickets. They want you to push for the senators and the representatives and the governors and everything else. And your local representatives and your local senators. And if your local candidate is either vying for that as a standalone person, that's a very difficult thing. And I would heartily disagree with going that way. I think you either have to do them all together, or if you want to stagger, then you stagger. And I still don't think every 2 years. I think you've got to get away, because it's not only that the person managing the team, it's also if the players change, then you've got different debates on things that were almost settled. So for instance, Academy School, we were in literally contract negotiation for language on the contracts. It was moving through the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen was negotiating paragraph by paragraph. The change on the board came, and that became a dead issue, because the new person coming in did not want to move Academy forward. So it became a dead issue. That, if you've got half your Board of Selectmen changing up, then, or potentially all, if all of a sudden the people who are even in your party don't want to run again as well, you're dealing with an entire new board that could, once again, derail. If we want continuity, I think you've got to me, go for 4. And I'll stop debating now.
Just a quick search of the general statute says section 9-164, regular and special municipal elections. There shall be in each municipality biennially a municipal election on either the first Monday of May or the Tuesday after the first Monday of November of the odd numbered years, whichever date the legislative body determines.
So based on that leaves us then with
2 or 4.
2 or 4, but then who's 2 and who's 4?
Mhm.
So why don't we talk for a bit about the idea of proposing 4 years for everybody, or 4 years for the first and 2 years for the volunteers, or I suppose we could do it the other way, but none of our discussion would lead us that way, to 2 years for the first and 4 years for everybody else. Thoughts on this? I mean, and one thing I'd like to advance on it is I think some things, the other thing I want to kind of talk about is the idea of getting people to do it. So, you know, rare is the thing where someone says, would you sign on for this? And you'll do it for 4 years. So do we think that maybe that's better? Because I have a friend in another town who's being asked to run for something, and the idea of running for something kind of, but maybe once every 4 years. You know, do we think it's easier to ask somebody for a commitment for 2 years? So, you know, I don't know if you
I
know,
think it's
you
easier
guys,
to ask somebody to run every 4 years. They'll commit to it. They're volunteers. They love doing this. It's the election, it's the every 2 years having to go out and get elected. That is the arduous thing of every candidate that I talk to. I can tell you that right now. So that's my point. Sorry.
so Matt, if we ask you to run for selectman tomorrow, or Dave is the, sorry, I don't mean to eliminate Liz or Bob, just those are the two on my screen. This is any of the 4 of you, is the 2 or 4 years making a difference to you?
Actually, it would. You know, again, I kind of take a different stance than Joan. I think, you know, the 4 year for the first selectman, you know, you want that continuity, right? That's actually a job, if you will, right? But the volunteering, and again, I've never run for anything, right? So I don't, you know, I'll certainly concede that it's difficult, right, to you know, to go through elections. But, you know, as if I'm volunteering for something, I would much rather volunteer for a shorter term and then re-up, right? Because it gives me as a volunteer the option. That's my thought.
Okay, can I just put that, if you're volunteering, that's one thing, but in order to get elected, you are from the end of August through November focused on getting reelected.
Yeah, no,
That's like, I'm talking nights, weekends.
Yeah, no, I understand that. But what I'm saying is, you know, if we want more people to get involved, if we want more, you know, people outside of the norm to run, right? I don't know.
But they're not doing it now, and it's 2 years. It's
yeah.
2 years now, and there's no one running to say, oh, it's only 2 years, I'm going to be on the Board of Selectmen.
No, that's a fair point. Yeah.
And the thing I keep hearing is, I heard Al, I heard Bruce, I heard Scott, and I heard Peggy. I'm not sure if Aaron said it as well, but they were all pretty much unified in, we need 4 years. That was, yeah, because it's tough. If you're a new person, Joe, I was the new person, right? After 2 years, you're just getting your feet under you, and then you're running again.
Well, the reality is, after 2 years, you've only been through one budget cycle that's your own, because the first one was created before you got there.
Right.
That's the thing. And I'll say that when I was elected to the Board of Finance, that's a 4-year term. And it was okay, but to the argument for staggering, what was kind of nice is that the board changed every couple of years. You know what I mean? So that if I could channel my inner Noreen, if she were here, she would probably point out that, you know, there's always a concern that the board isn't responsive. You know, so at least the staggering function of the Board of Finance meant that there was public will coming in every 2 years, but any one member was sitting for 4.
So Joan, you bring up a good point. You know, I mean, we have 2 now, and, you know, we're not getting, you know, 24 people trying to run every single term. I mean, that's a fair point. You know, so, but I also, you know, Joe, to your point, I do agree with the staggered terms. I think that's a good idea. And if that's, you know, that kind of gives another out, right? So if somebody runs and gets elected for 4 years, you know, if they determine that, you know, they're, you know, it's not for them, they're going to bow out, then, you know, 2 years later, they could be part of that, you know, that other election cycle, I guess, right?
No, they can't. You are elected for a 4-year term, but you're staggered So they would have to resign and somebody would have to be appointed in their place. Unless it's a first select person, then you have a special election.
Oh, so you couldn't just add that person's role to the,
No.
to the next?
Nope.
Oh.
No, you then fill the seat, the Board of Selectmen fill the seat for the term that's vacated. I suppose we're the Charter Review Commission. We
Well,
could change that, but you wouldn't
yeah,
want to
wait
hold
a
a special
second.
election. That would be confusing.
Right.
But one thing, what we could do is, just to throw out, it's a timing issue of when the selectmen left. And if it's in the first term prior to, if it's in the second year, you can have the appointment and then elect them for a 2-year term to get back on cycle without having a special election.
But I think one concern about that is that if you have then a growing and shrinking number of people on cycle, it becomes, and this point, this becomes hard for the electorate to know who's up. Frankly, it becomes hard for the town. I used to have enough trouble when I was board planning and zoning chair. We were like, now who's up? It doesn't sound, it's like it's a list. I mean, it's not that big a deal, but it's 9 people and you can't remember, who's coming when.
Yeah, well, what I was proposing is that you would fill out the term.
Yeah.
You wouldn't get a full 4 years. So you'd be back on.
Yeah, we could.
The numbers.
As opposed
to. Possibility.
As opposed to appointing a person to. So I became a selectman when Tom Scarpati, who would run for first selectman, made it to the Board of Selectmen when Al was first. And then a few months later, he stepped down and I was appointed to the remainder of his position and then ran myself for the next couple of terms. I don't know that holding a special election would be good because A, it costs money, and B, I think then you're really asking people in March, February to come and make a commitment. I think
been there, done that.
I don't think anyone's calling for a special election.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that's what you were suggesting.
No, I'm saying that if at the end of the first year of a 4-year term, someone leaves town, resigns, they would be appointed to come for the next 12 months. And then they'd have to run for a two-year term.
See, that's the problem. The person, so what happens is
you wouldn't have a special election.
The thing about when you win your election, you have that 4-year term. If you decide not to do it,
that's a good
it's
point.
still the 4-year term that you were elected to. So that's why it's not willy-nilly. If you're a Democrat, Democrats give the appointee to the Board of Selectmen. If you're a Republican, like Joe, we didn't, like the Democrats didn't say, no, we want Tom Scarpati's seat. It was Joe McDougal who took, Tom's seat as a Republican.
That makes sense. I'm convinced.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the appointment by the appointment system for vacancies, I don't think is a bad one. It sort of works that part's okay. I think the question is the terms themselves. So let's start the conversation on the first part. Should the first selectman be different than the Board of Selectmen? Let's just sort of forgetting staggering and forgetting things. Do we need to vote for everybody all at once? What's the virtue of doing them all together versus not doing them all together? Then we can figure out what not doing them all together might mean. But if we think they should be voted all together, then that ends.
So I'm going to throw in.
Hold on, Joan. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, Joan's pretty passionate about this. So just going back to your original question, Joe, if I was running for office, or for selectman, I would want a 4-year term. It would just be too much. It would take me too long to understand the new role that I'm in, and to actually get something accomplished. The 2 years is just too quick.
Great.
But again, I'm also thinking about, in terms of staggering, what's best for the public, not so much for an election cycle or campaigning, but what's best for the townspeople. And I like the idea of getting some fresh thought in on a staggered approach, even if you have a 4-year terms, but you just have some new people coming through. And I do think about the inner Noreen saying, what if you have some bad eggs and you need to move things along? So I do like that. And then for the current question, when we do everyone at once, I mean, you could have a completely new board coming in. There's no continuity with that. So I would argue for having a different cycle. It was a staggered approach to it.
So on the other side, we've done 2 years since they have had a board of selectmen. It's all or nothing. And I can't remember the last time it was 5 brand new people. Do you, Joe?
No, if I think back, when's the last time there were 3 brand new people?
That would have been, nope.
Because
there was- no.
even under when Al won, eventually it was 2 brand new people. It was me and Al.
Mhm.
And then if I think forward, Fillmore came in, and then I think that was just the only new person was Fillmore. And
Was
then
Diane new at that point in time too?
Diane came in later, so she would have been new, but she wasn't that first election. I think she was the second.
Yeah.
Right. And did you come in on that election?
No, I came in on Fillmore's second, I think, term.
Yeah. So maybe, but that would have been 2 new people. And then, yeah, I can't remember the last time there were 3 new people.
So, but if we look at it, so the staggering, so you'd have 3 in, say, 2021, and then 2 in 2023. So the
Right.
only people running, because you can't do a supermajority on 5. So, right, you can only have 1 Democrat and 1 Republican run them.
Right. So the minority
That's it.
representation rules. So each boards are subject to the minority representation rules, where the I'm sorry, I haven't done this in a little while, but the majority can't be 1 party. That does not mean that if you had a majority of Democrats that it requires 2 Republicans. You could have a Republican and a Green Party member. You know what I mean? But you can't. The most you can have on the Board of Selectmen are 3 members or 4, Joan? 3. 3 members.
That's
3
a
members of the
majority,
same
Actually,
Joe, by the way. My math.
That was one of the things
I said a super majority. And
Oh,
what I mean by super
supermajority, okay.
majority is you
Okay.
can't have 4 Democrats
Right.
with 1 Republican. So the off cycle are 2 Board of Selectmen members that are volunteers that don't have a headed ticket, that are running with some of the Board of Ed and some of the Board of Finance. And that it's almost guaranteed that those 2 members would be elected. Because you can't do more than 1. Right? I'm thinking through the workings of it. And if we need to reduce the Board of Finance, which Ira recommended either to 5 or increase to 7, then the same thing happens. Who is ever on that 2-person cycle is pretty much just guaranteed to win.
Well, I do have a question. In 4.1, to your, what you guys are talking about, it says no more than 3 members of the selectmen shall be the same political party. No, just out of curiosity, why is that in there? Why is that? I understand why you would, ideally why you'd want that, but it seems strange to put that limitation in the charter.
I believe that's reflecting state statute, which is the minority representation rules. Now you can ask why that's in state statute. What's the harm of letting parties, and depending on which party you're from and how you're doing it, the cycle, you love or hate that rule. Because it does mean that no one party ever puts in a bigger foothold. But these are the rules of the game as presented to us as I understand them.
So that's a state requirement?
Right.
Oh, interesting.
And I guess one question should be, why do we have it in there? Why don't we could always indicate it by, we could always just follow state statute. Right now, if the state changes their mind, then we're stuck with it.
So the thought process is,
Oh, yeah.
you know, you always want to have an odd number. So do we bring it up to 7, and then the staggered to me is a lot more, then that makes sense to me. Because you're always running at least 2 people.
Yeah, I was originally, for the staggering, but because of this limitation, and then also the other thing where the first selectman, it's possible that if somebody runs for first selectman and they lose, and then they get, they could potentially be a selectman, right? So that kind of, because of that, it's staggering may not be the way to go.
Right. Well, it does have a problem, because if it works out that they're running in an election where they're running with 2 party members, you could have a first selectman lose but not sit because of the minority part representation rules.
Mhm.
And it seems odd, but I think that's right. If they're running in the 2-person cycle.
Right. I don't think you'd
No, I
ever.
think David's raised a really interesting issue that's almost primary to discussion here. Is 5 the right number? Because if you change it, it may change how we think about staggered terms, given the requirement of minority representation.
My personal thing is, if we stay with 5, I think it's got to be kind of an all or nothing during that year. And then you've got 4 years. If we bump up to 7, then the staggering makes a little bit more sense. But then, Lauren, is 7, what's the majority? Can it be a 5-2? I can't remember.
No, I think it can only be a 4-3.
Can only be a 4-3? Okay.
No more than 4 members from one political party.
Right. So the reason staggering works for the Board of Finance is because it's 6 people, and you can have a 4-2 majority with 6.
So
I think when it's, and with the Board of Ed, it's 9. So you've got 4 and 5. There's a lot going on there. Below that, you're talking 7 is going to be 4 and 3. So that's still a good one. I think the 3-2 is going to be tough, because it's one person's always going to get in on that too. And even the 4-3, depending on who wins the 4, the 3 may just be a quick.
Yeah. So
you guys
required.
You guys have been on the board. Is the workload such that a 7-member board makes more sense?
From my standpoint, in the
yes
question
or no?
of what's the problem we're solving, I think the issues in this section are, we've heard now from several parties that the continuity is an issue with the first selectman. And then I think the conversation we're having is, does that necessarily change the other selectmen? But from my perspective, 5 members was very comfortable on the Board of Selectmen. There's a series of things about how you can talk to each other on the Board of Selectmen. So one of the things you can't do is you can't speak unless, and this blew me away when I first came to understand it, unless you're of the same party, you can't talk about substance to 2 other selectmen, because you can only caucus. The Freedom of Information Act rules, from my perspective, encouraged polarization, because you had to be very cautious. I think our boards are very careful not to violate FOIA. So I don't know that expanding that helps, because then it would mean that groups would talk to each other of the same party bigger groups. Right now, any 2 or 3 people, you need everybody else, like you just do. So the conversations tend to be chatty, when you get on the board, because you can't have a big enough discussion. I think if you make the board bigger, you run the risk that more work will get done in caucus, which I think is unattractive, to quote Sandra Day O'Connor.
And just from a staff viewpoint, I can't imagine trying to wrangle 7 Board of Selectmen members for a special meeting. It's incredibly hard to wrangle 5.
Oh my God, I didn't even think about the specials. Yeah.
Yeah, just, when I have like certain things that are really time sensitive and need to get done right away, it's very hard for me to pull the 5 of the board together. I can't imagine having to pull 7 people from their day jobs, basically.
Also, if it was 7, would we be able to get that many people to? I can't remember the last elections. How many people ran? Over the 5.
30, 40, something like that. Yeah.
Usually it's been years since there was more than 6 people. The 2 for first selectman, and then 2 for each of the parties, and then whoever is the lowest vote getter is bumped off. So
I think that right there might push us in favor of the 5 versus the 7, right? I mean,
so if we're not changing the number, why don't we start with the sense of the board? I don't want to make light of an important issue, but sort of as a foundational matter, are we of a mind that the first selectman term should be longer?
Absolutely.
So is that,
let me play Noreen. I mean, the strongest argument seemed to me that if you get a total nutcase, you can get rid of this nutcase in 2 years rather than 4. Don't be so sure that you will get rid of the nutcase. You can have a recall if needed, and you have the full board. So it just seems to me not really a strong argument to keep it at 2.
I would remind you that both Joan and I have been elected to the Board of Selectmen, so clearly the nutcase filter doesn't work as well as it should. They let us in, but
we need to keep this discussion civil, Joe.
Yeah. So I think that's right. I mean, I think that the point is, the advantage of having a short term is it's a short term, and the question then, I think the article of faith is, if it's a longer term, does it both and this and the other changes we have in, does it both encourage continuity, but also encourage more people to find this position attractive that might have management experience and other stuff?
Yeah.
Lauren, do we know, and I'm sorry if we've covered this before, do we know the terms of first selectmen in other towns?
So I think I pulled it up at the last meeting, Joe, when you were not here. And
we were shocked that most of them were 2 years.
Most of them were 2.
I think we're learning from Guilford, because Guilford went to 4, and pretty much it really helped them that's what they thought.
And I would point out, particularly when we get to the Board of Finance, I mean, that's been a 4-year term forever, and the power of the Board of Finance is enormous. It's not as powerful as the first selectman, clearly, but it's significant. Excellent.
So this last column here are the CEO terms. These are for all selectmen, town meeting, form of government. You'll see almost all of them are 2-year terms, maybe a handful here are 4-year. And this still has Guilford as being a 2-year term as well. And this is relatively new. This is updated from CCM from only 6 months ago.
Oh, they haven't updated their info. It all depends on if they've given their information update. So there could be more, but
I hate lists like this because I always look at the left and I'm like, I had no idea that was a town. I don't know where Sterling, Connecticut is.
Oh, I have
But-
family from there.
Oh well, there you. Well, tell them they should be more vocal.
Clearly.
It was 3,000 people.
I was like, all 3,700 of them.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So yeah,
So-
I'd say less than 10 of these are 4-year terms.
Yeah, but so, that doesn't, yeah.
No, you're right. That doesn't mean that their next intrepid charter review commission won't follow suit by the brave Madison folks and
Right.
lead us on to the future. So going back to the original question, if I can just see a hand wave, is it the sense of the board that we want to suggest increasing the term, or we're inclined to? Yeah. All right, so that's pretty persuasive. So let's talk about the second issue. If we're increasing the term, sort of let's kind of focus not on the mechanic, but should the selectmen have the same term as the first selectman? Let's just sort of leave it at that piece for a second. So what do we think about that? So why don't we sort of see if who thinks that they should all be voted in versus wanting to have more discussion. So I'm okay with leaving them in. Who would like to have more discussion on the topic? Okay. So if you want to I think that this is a little bit of algebra going on with this one. So think about it, because my retreat position, if we ran into substantial opposition to the 4-year term of the entire board, would be to say 4-year first selectman, 2-year everyone else. And my argument to that is the 2-year everyone else is working okay. That's not exactly the problem we're trying to fix. So I'm persuaded by Joan's point that it creates an oddity every other cycle.
But it also leaves the Board of Selectmen out compared to everyone else. So Board of Ed is 4 years, Board of Finance is 4 years. And then the poor Board of Selectmen has to do it every 2 years.
Yeah.
I know I will get harangued if I don't keep pushing for this, because I have had couple of calls there. So.
None from any current selectmen, I'm sure.
None. Yeah. Oh yeah, sure. No, but I think that I feel that would be, that would become problematic in getting people to run.
Yeah.
Quite honestly.
What would be problematic?
2 years.
2 years.
3 years.
Or maybe said differently, it's an incentive to ask someone to run for 4 years. Get in, you're in for 4 years, and then you can see if you want to do it again.
Right. There's always, if you're not doing well and you don't like to do it, there is an out where you can resign, or if something comes up. I was elected and for another 4 years, and in my second year of that term, my dad had a stroke and I had to resign. I needed to help, so somebody else came aboard in my place, but I had full expectation to go for all 4 years.
All right.
At the time, 2 years, sorry.
Right. So our proposal then, is for 4 years, all members of the board.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I could agree to that. I'm not really passionate one way or the other about the rest of the selectmen, to be honest. I see Joan's points.
Me too.
Yeah, I agree with you. If I were negotiating with the town vote and said I can't get it passed with everyone at 4 years, but we can do 4 and 2, I can see the arguments for it, but I can see the wisdom of that. I do feel much more strongly about extending the term of the first selectman.
Yeah.
To my own thinking is, does that mean the other board should come on? And I see the problem of the off-cycle election.
Well, I think this is one of our discussion points for our next rounding public hearing. Hopefully people will show up, right?
Oh, I think if we put this out, I think people will come in to talk about it.
Yep.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, if we can outsource, whether it's the public forum or even if there's, other people that can weigh in, that'd be fantastic.
Okay. Well, look at us. We've done a thing. So where to next? Yeah. So here we are into the oh, I'm sorry. I skipped ahead a section. Sorry, Lauren. For some reason, the print's smaller and displaying it however you're displaying it now versus when I've gotten it before. Suggesting to add December when the second meeting is generally canceled. Shall hold no fewer than 2 regularly scheduled meetings, except for the month of August.
And then
Do
Ira's
we need all
suggestion,
this?
yeah, Ira's suggestion was, do you even need to put it in the charter?
You mean the whole section?
Yeah.
Well, I guess so I would argue that you should. I mean, think about it. So, Joan becomes first selectman and, she has 2 other selectmen and they vote not to meet for the next 6 months.
What's the problem with that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I recognize minutes and getting schedules are difficult.
Right.
So one of the things that seems a little odd is, so except for the months of July and August, I'm trying to recall, I don't remember taking anything off from the Board of Selectmen except for like 1 meeting in August.
Oh, no, we did July and August. It was a middle of, we changed it. So it was kind of a mid-month meeting. And then we would always have the beginning of December and we'd always cancel the December meeting every time.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
we would schedule July and then have a special if we needed.
Yeah, we always cancel the morning meeting in July and August and have 1 evening meeting in each of those months.
See, it was so far back, Joe.
So
And-
maybe we should, an easier way to phrase this, she'll meet twice per month and no less than 20 times per year and let them figure it out.
I mean, do you need to
That's
specify twice per month?
Inconsistent logically.
Why? They could all meet, they
You
could
tell
just
them
meet the
they've
first
gotta
week.
meet twice a month, and 2 times 12 is
She'll
24.
meet, yeah, you're right. She'll meet generally twice a month and not
Oh,
less than,
generally, okay.
yeah, and not less than 20 times a
Okay.
year.
If
I'm
you put in
thinking too-
wiggle room, then, okay.
Yeah, I'm a lawyer. What do you want?
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know. Actually, is this something to fix? I mean, has this ever been a problem? I don't know.
I think it's the only reason there was a suggestion to add December because the December meeting is almost always canceled, the second one in December. But now if we're starting the term in the first meeting of December, then maybe that won't be canceled as often.
But we're doing it every 4 years.
That's true.
Actually,
I kind of like the I don't know.
I would be okay with actually adding December in, but leaving the language in. It's just not something that's broken. Thoughts?
I don't think it matters. I mean, you have the meetings when you have meetings, when you need them, right? So there's some months that you have 3 probably, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, I don't care.
And on to 4.1.2.
Yeah.
So David, are we going to get you to run? No, sorry.
He's coming in. I could feel it.
David and Matt, we're pulling people in. No, sorry. Liz, come on. We've all done it.
4 years now.
All
So are
right.
we adding December here or are we just leaving it?
I think you should add December because
Okay.
we almost always canceled that meeting before Christmas. Usually we end up meeting in some other form anyway at some event.
Oh, okay. Have fun. Are you having dinner there?
Probably not. I'm just going there.
The event sounds like it's called a party.
or a tree lighting, you're down in the green. There's a thing. Okay.
Hey, I actually not to belabor the point, but typically, so and again, I don't, the number of meetings per month, right? But if there's something in the charter or there's something in the standard, then there should be some mechanism, right, or accountability for not meeting that requirement. So, you mentioned that, so currently it's only July and August where, less than 2 meetings are allowed. But, if we, in December, there's only 1 meeting, historically. So, I mean, why bother putting it in the charter if there's no mechanism to make any accountability? So in my mind, just make it, there should be, should meet no fewer than monthly.
Once
I
per
don't know.
month. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what
Well,
I mean? And then.
So we could say, we could say except for monthly, for 1 per month for July, August, and December, or at least once per month. I mean, the penalty is always if you're proceeding extra charter, but the reality is the Board of Selectmen hold extra meetings and cancel. I have no idea how many extra meetings there are per year, per month on average, but it has to be at least, in any given year, I have a hard time believing the board meets less than 30 times, particularly around budget season. Good gracious.
So maybe you could write, generally twice a month, but no less than once a month. And
That's
just
an
give a little bit of leeway.
I like that.
Actually, I'm fine with that.
Just using your attorney's wiggle room.
So she'll generally meet twice per month and no less than once per month. And then we don't have to worry about months at all. I like that. And my feeling is we'll still get the board meeting 30 times, 30 times a year anyway, or more.
There's just a lot to do. Yeah.
Actually, Noreen's in the participant.
Oh, is she?
Yeah.
So she was in a couple minutes ago. I'll move her.
Hey, Noreen.
Hello.
Hello, there you are. Hey.
I'm sorry. I couldn't get on time and then I got into participation somehow. Hello. Sorry. Just continue. I've been listening for the last couple minutes.
Oh, no problem. So, Noreen, the current section we're discussing has us changing the Board of Selectmen language to say it shall meet generally twice per month, but no less than once per month, and getting rid of the July, August, December, whatever.
I'm sorry, the last part. So what do you mean get rid of? Give them an option to get rid of?
Yeah. So right now the language says you'll meet no fewer than 2 regularly scheduled meetings per month, and then it says, however, except for July and August. And as we all know, we generally cancel the December meeting and sometimes the September meeting, but then you have extra meetings in addition. So the proposal is the Board of Selectmen shall meet generally twice per month, but no less than once per month. They can meet as much as they want, but that's the charter requirement.
That sounds good. It sounds great.
Excellent.
It's been so long, I don't remember what happens in the summer, to tell you the truth.
I seem to recall that we ended up meeting more than we thought, but not for August. But Joan's probably right that I think we probably shrunk it to 1 meeting in July as well.
Yeah, Joan's been more current, her memory with that one. That sounds fine.
Good. And now we are on to general powers of the Board of Selectmen. So we've got a note that we're going to send this piece over to Ira. Do we have any feedback with him?
I don't think he's given us back detailed feedback, just a couple of things to look at. So I definitely think that this is a section we can maybe put off to a future meeting so that we can keep getting through other things.
Yeah, I think I'd like to talk about this section in conjunction with the Board of Finance section. Lauren, if you can kind of tag it. So if we kind of put a pin in this one and when we do the same trick for the Board of Finance as we run through it, I think they're next. Then why don't we sort of just put the two powers section next to each other on the screen and see how they sync up? Because that seems to be the biggest issue we've been pointed toward. Does that sound okay? And just to
Sorry, I don't think it.
Is anyone else losing Joe?
I am.
I've lost Joe, can't hear him.
So just there and scroll.
Joe, we can't hear anything
right
that you're saying.
at the dot.
Joe.
Joe, we're not being disrespectful here. We just,
Oh, he just went black, so maybe he's just checking his connection. I think he just left.
I'm gonna go to his house and rewire his router.
We lost Joe and Noreen.
Oh, Joe's back in, it looks like.
Just move Noreen back over.
Is anybody else seeing?
Sorry
the
about that,
black
gang.
space?
how long is this meeting going to go, by the way?
I think I'm back, Joe. Lauren, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Noreen.
Hey, thank you. I don't know what happened. Okay, can we go back to that question, Joe?
There we go. Oh, yeah, I was going to suggest, just as a way to close out the meeting, why don't we scroll up on the right-hand side of 4.1.3 and just sort of take a quick gander through the general duties section, and then we can just pick up here next time. Does that sound okay? I love that warning that says your internet connection is unstable for Zoom. Do we have everybody?
I'm on.
We've got everybody back, Joe.
I think we're
And
losing
you're
you
still
again,
unstable
Joe.
again.
Hello?
Nope.
Is Joe on?
I think we lost Joe again.
Yeah.
Okay. I think he wanted to for us to just review the general duties and responsibilities. And then the specific, maybe if we all do that prior to the next meeting and try to look at it and compare what's happening with the Board of Finance ourselves too.
Yeah, and then we can think about some ideas. That sounds like a great idea.
Agreed.
Sounds good.
Oh, Madam Vice Chair, you're on.
Yes.
Yeah, no, I mean, that sounds like what he wanted to.
Yeah,
accomplish.
he just texted me. He said, why don't you read 4.1.3 together quickly? Any thoughts? Let's write them down and then we can close the meeting.
Okay. Wasn't there one thing that he specified that we've heard about? What was that? Didn't he specify one thing in this section that had come up?
I think it was the general power between
Yeah, hi.
Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen. Oh, he's back.
Yeah, sorry. I keep getting internet warnings. Who knows what's going on? So very quickly, I was just going to say, do we have any issues on 4.1.3 for general duties? And sort of take a look at that section, see if there's anything we want to use to start discussion. And if not, then I was going to propose talking about just our next meeting time and move on.
Can I just bring up one thing? I don't have anything in that section to bring up. but I assume I missed something today. I just wanted to bring up, I was looking at the section of the responsibility of first selectman. One of them is to appoint a lot of our different positions in town. But I think something has happened a few times over the years that, I shouldn't say few, I know of two, where the Board of Selectmen member or the first selectman has actually asked staff as a matter of record for a new administration for resignation letters. And in both times, it's caused a lot of problems. And I think it'd be great if we could clarify that somehow. I don't know what it would look like, but I know it's a problem. And if the first selectman or his or her designee has the right to do that, we should clarify it. But Joe, I don't ever remember that being something that we thought happened, because we don't have political appointments in our town. These are people that, but it is in the charter that the first selectman gets to appoint them under
Yeah.
their. So that's one of the things I'm sorry I missed today. If you talked about that at all, we could do it next time.
No, we haven't.
Oh,
It's important
Yeah,
to talk
so-
about it.
I thought I missed that, but I'd like to discuss that when the time is right.
One of the questions it brings up, and maybe Lauren, since you're sending stuff out to Ira anyway, might be good to see what we should say about town staff in the charter. I mean, it's kind of a funny world where the charter talks about everybody else who engages, but we don't really talk about staff very much.
Well, we do talk about appointing them. They're
Right.
and it'll list all of them. It'll list all of them. I don't remember if everybody was on it, but I think it'd be good if we clarified that or got that, because I think it causes unnecessary problems that we could easily straighten out. There are communities and cities especially that these are political appointments, and it's just never been that way in Madison. But I don't think it's clear from the charter.
All right. So I was going to say, Lauren, maybe if you're talking to Ira, maybe we can ask if anyone has language already on that.
Mhm.
So I assume your position, Noreen, would be don't do that.
Oh, definitely. I mean, Joe, these people are town employees. They're especially senior staff. I mean, all, I shouldn't say especially all, and we've never looked at anything with town day-to-day operations with people that work there. I don't think any of us could even tell you what party anybody's in.
Well,
so don't do that.
It would be sort of a funny world where we've been trying to do stuff and extend terms in order to encourage continuity and not protect the
Right.
people that are the ones who are continuous.
Well, I'll tell you, in the past,
Well, I think that, but it also brings up an issue if you have a town employee that isn't functioning well, you don't want to lock the person who's managing them into something that isn't working out.
oh, I totally agree with that, Joe. Joe, no, what
Yeah.
I'm saying is the day after an election, for someone to go to town hall and pick specific one or many, who knows, and ask them for a letter of recommendation, a letter of resignation, so they could decide whether or not they'll stay. Totally nothing on merit or what they've done. This is a new administration. And in my recollection, it's only happened twice. And I think it's just something this charter would really, I think, help. Because Joe will tell, well, Joan, you've been a chairman, you've been on the board. That's never been an issue with a staff member losing their job because depending on who gets into office. We've never had that in our town. And I just think we should clarify.
Yeah, but you also, if let's assume for a second a department isn't running well. You know what I mean? I mean, here's the problem though, is a lot of things drive elections. Like we've had controversies in town with major elements of town government, and the last thing you would really want is someone elected to clean up pick your favorite department, comes in and then suddenly, again, not to be a lawyer, but the last thing I would want to do is create an invested right within the charter of some employee right where now they say, but wait, you cannot terminate me because blah, blah, it's kind of a fine line to thread.
Well-
I agree with the sentiment that you shouldn't ask for general resignation so you can appoint everyone willy-nilly.
Well, but Joe, we're not, okay.
Maureen and Bob.
No, just quickly, I mean,
What about-
I'm probably the only civil servant currently employed on this call. And I am a government employee. I have civil service protections, but indeed I can be fired and should be fired if I'm not performing up to standards. But I should not be fired because of my political party affiliation.
Right.
Or because,
that's the thread.
So one can have, you know, if there's ever a town that I think culturally is appropriate, wants to be a civil service community with a professional work staff that, you know, needs to be held to standards, but not subject to dismissal for being of the wrong political party or somebody. Anyway, you get my point. So I think maybe a charter should embed that, but you gotta be careful how you do it too.
So Bob, I would suggest that maybe when we do get to the point where we break up into subgroups or little work committees, that maybe one or two of us maybe take a look at the process, you know, hearing what Noreen's saying, but Joe brings up a great point as well too, that, you know, we don't want to put so many obstacles in place so we can't, you know, take care of the issues at hand.
Absolutely.
We, you know, maybe there should be, you know, a subsection here that a couple of us can tackle and bring it to the larger group.
And maybe we can, go ahead,
Sorry.
Joan.
And maybe even think of, maybe that's where the ethics committee comes in, or the, because to me, that's ethically irresponsible to just say, if you're not part of my party, I'm gonna wipe you out. But if you're not doing your job, we don't want, once again, and because it's my understanding, I don't think there's reviews that happen still. I think they're going to try to get them in, but that just makes it based on, you know, what the person has observed up until that point in time.
May I just add that the two situations that I know this has happened, it wasn't a political party thing. They weren't, person wasn't asked for their resignation because of where they were registered. I think it was someone maybe who was tied to the previous administration as far as working every day. I don't know why it happened, but it's happened twice. And tell you the truth, we've lost good employees because of it. And you know, this is a small town. Most of these people live in our town that work for, a lot of them do. And I just think it's got to be cleaned up. I think it's misunderstanding, personally, of a selectman, first selectman or their designee's role. But I think this is not, I don't know of any time someone in Madison asked for someone's resignation because of their party affiliation. I didn't mean to say that. I meant a new administration comes in and just as a matter of course, wants all these letters of resignation that they can make a decision whether or not they want to keep them, not because of job performance, just because they can. And
Well,
two cases that I know of.
No, Noreen, maybe it's a simple thing, and it's screaming IRA advice to me.
Yeah,
But maybe it's a simple thing to say, you know, that the administration shall not require, you know, blanket letters of resignation, versus because any first selectman can just terminate. You know, I mean, it's one thing for you to issue a letter of resignation. That's very easy. Then you're not reappointed, but you've voluntarily quit your job. Versus, you know what, I don't like the way the blah 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 is running in town, firing you. You know, that's a very different thing. And I think we need to leave room for the latter and not use the political process for the former. Does that sound, am I framing, it's your issue, am I framing it right?
I agree with that. I just think we want to make sure, I kind of lost my train of thought, but no, I agree with that. You know, Joe, when three people in this group, I believe, are sort of new to Madison politics. I could be wrong, but I think so. And when we say things like, you know, if they're just not doing a good job, we want to terminate them. That's not what happens in town. You know, and I'm sure Joan does too, how hard it is to get rid of not a strong employee, how long it takes us to move somebody out. And there's also legal action involved. It's a whole new world. So it's not done quickly. But when someone comes into office and asks for blanket resignation or maybe one specific, whatever, it really sets a terrible tone for the town. And you know what our town employees are. these are their careers. We've got people here, key people if you look over, 20 years, 30 years, we don't have many key people that come and stay for 5 years and leave. And so I just think we got to clean that up because it really, really has caused morale problems.
Have we ever had a member of town staff run for selectmen? I was just trying to play the game out in my head, like, well, wait a minute, what if your opponent? So when Lauren runs for first selectman, and I'm happy to campaign for you, Lauren. When Lauren runs for first selectman, if she loses, then her opponents, that, you know what I mean? Like
well, you mean still keep her job as in town office while she's running?
I'm sure she would win. Yeah.
No, but I think there's something in the charter that you can't be employed and be.
Yeah, it's prohibited.
At my level, there's something called the Hatch Act, guys.
But that's after you would be
I
appointed.
cannot run for partisan office.
Well, under the right conditions, you could give it a whirl. So I guess if I could, let's keep this point, Lauren. If you can maybe add that question to the IRA list, maybe you've seen something helpful out there that would just make sense. And I think then otherwise, why don't we then pick up? So Noreen, we're gonna punt on 4.1.2 and consider that section when we consider the Board of Finance section. And we'll kind of leave the powers of the two boards next to each other and talk about them that way. And for general duties and responsibilities at 4.1.3, grab a look at it between now and next time we sit down, because there's a question in my mind. I don't have it's literally a question. I'm not sitting here with a queued up answer. Is that list too small or out of date? Or maybe it's too big, because we kind of really like general responsibilities, blah, 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 blah. Well, wait a minute, let's talk about books and records. Like maybe we should actually have a chat about, what that one should look like. Not so much a legal chat as what do we think the board should be doing? Otherwise,
Joe, may I just add one more thing? You just brought it up. As Lauren talks to Ira, can we find it just the opposite of what I'm saying? Can we find out right now? It's very hard to get rid of an employee. Is there something we could do with their for future contracts, that for cause or whatever? But I mean, look at everything we've done with key employees. We either have to give them an incredible handshake or we're in court. Is there something we can do to protect the town from an employee that's not doing the job?
And I don't know that any of that, the charter limits the powers of the Board of Selectmen, not the employees that work for it. So my strong suspicion is that the charter is the wrong tool for the job.
Okay. Right.
I mean, it's worth a question, but I don't know that. I'm just trying to think if I were, advising an employee, they'd say, well, the town charter says I can't appeal. I'm like, so what? Would be my.
I'm thinking of years ago that we had an employee that was really a key employee that was really, really not doing the job. We had years of complaints and we could not get rid of this person. Finally, this person got arrested and was in jail. And that's how we were able to negotiate something. That's how the extreme measures to really move on and be able to put someone in charge of that department that would do the job. But anyway, I just think those are two big issues for the Board of Selectmen.
This isn't part of the charter, but Joan, going back to, did you say there's no review process for employees?
Correct me if I'm wrong, Lauren. Senior staff do not go through reviews, and that was something that we attempted several times.
So there is no review process, right? There is no annual review process right now. There is a review process in place for new hires where their supervisor reviews them after 90 days or 6 months, whatever's in their conditional offer letter. But it's a one-time review of how they're pretty much fulfilling the position that they were hired to do.
So to the and I can't remember. I think it was Matt I think it was Matt's point about when we sort of break up and talked about a couple of issues. I'm sort of tying Noreen's point to this point to literally we should maybe have a discussion about the not so much the employee rights of town charter, but what the town charter says about the town employees, whether it's a duty of the Board of Selectmen or something like it. Like Sometimes we talk about in different groups in my day job, we take a section, we say, let's talk about student experience. That's different than teaching, and you know what I mean? Like the sort of that bigger theme.
But Joe, one of the points that you made earlier, I mean, should we have a dedicated, spot or even another article that deals with town employees? I think that's a blind spot to our charter as it is now.
Yeah, either that or there's a million labor employees screaming right now, don't do it. Like
I'm thinking, I think that's what I would be saying.
Yeah, I am no expert in that particular area of the law. Like maybe we should ask them, but maybe there's something at least proactive we could give as a burden to the first selectman. The first selectman shall, communicate with staff and report on the health of town staff.
May
May
I just,
the budget, about
Joe,
the health of the roads, not health, but you know what I mean, experience. Sorry.
Joe, years ago, 25, 30 years ago, I'm getting so old. I was chairman of Beach and Rec for 10 years, and I used to review Scott Erskine every year. So it's really the question we're talking about is Jones Wright and senior staff. And I think then they put together this committee, which I don't know if it even meets anymore, but as we have developed the HR position in town hall, we've got a real professional there. We never had that years ago. And we did have a 3-person committee. I don't think they're active. I don't know. I know they're still there in place, but I don't know if they meet. And there was senior staff review by them working with the HR director. And over the years, I think HR has taken over more and more, but there definitely was. And it was problematic when we had to do it because the way I would review might be different than another commission member from another department would review their person. And you could easily, I could have easily put Scott at a disadvantage, because it was tied to compensation.
Yeah, there's no longer that tie to compensation, but I think it's difficult if you've got an employee that's struggling, that isn't in the right position to justify moving or justify a change without doing, pretty negative things in an HR file versus just having reviews and goals and met goals or not meet goals and things like that. So it's something we could potentially consider. I don't think it's part of charter.
Yeah, one of my concerns, even with what's the name of the job evaluation committee? Is that it?
Yeah.
Personally, I think we could have a reasonable discussion about killing that from the charter. Because it always strikes me as a very bizarre function that we take a bunch of volunteers when we have it as the world professionalizes and you have an HR department. The job evaluation committee struck me as a place that felt anachronistic, but we should probably have the discussion. So the first place I'd like to go again is not to always retreat to Ira on this point. Let's find out if charters talk about town staff. And if so, how do they do it? And let's borrow that idea. And if not, why not? And let's see if we agree with that rationale. And then we could pick this up. I wouldn't want to wade into this area without talking to perhaps our HR director.
Well, that's what I was to say. Why don't we have Deb Millardo? I mean, we've got a real professional. This is not the first town she's been. Why don't we have her connect one night, one of our meetings?
This is tied in directly to the question of, do you have a manager?
Yeah.
Or an administrator.
Yeah, but also when we get to the administrator piece, my personal thing had been the charter never should have been a way to interfere. Bob, when you become first selectman, you should set up the government the way you want. Noreen's bringing up a guardrail of you shouldn't ask everybody for resignations on day one, but otherwise you should run the town as you see fit. Otherwise we ossify into the same structures and the town goes from 18,000 people to 36,000 or 10,000. We're going to, function differently.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I've tried to end the meeting a couple of times. Now I'm going to use my massive authority and do so. So just to be clear, we're not meeting on a Tuesday, but on a Thursday, the
17th.
The 17th will be our next time. So we'll pick up, if we could do a little bit of homework, take a gander through the 4.1.3 and 4.1.4. See if we have any suggestions. I'm literally looking for thinking on that piece, and then we'll pick up. Go ahead, Joan.
And gonna put in my plug. where I can, and if people are watching this, thousands that are watching, Night in Hand will be done June 12th.
Right ahead.
Anybody can come and volunteer. It's going to be outside this year, so we can give you jobs. You don't have to have any skill set. We will find a job for you. So that is Saturday morning, and the event is going to be Saturday night, and the rain date is Sunday.
And probably again, to the extent that anyone does watch these, we've been talking about terms of serving on boards as, can you get people to do it? Can you just, honestly, it remains, I'll probably repeat this many times, one of the more meaningful things I've ever done. It's actually a lot of fun. We're only just talking about the negative portions here, because that's what you work out in the charter.
Mhm.
Right.
Lauren, do we have any members from the public who are dying to speak to us?
We have one member of the public and they do not have their hand raised.
Excellent.
And we want to thank you, Jennifer, for
Yeah, because she
attending.
knows what's good for her.
Great.
for keeping us going. All right, I will see you all on the 17th. Any last questions? Thank you. It was a good discussion.
Thanks, guys.